What's going on, everyone? Welcome. Episode 71 of Poppet's Corner. We're going up all the way to the Bay Area today. I'm starting to dig these mobile, I don't know what you call them, mobile recordings. It's pretty cool, especially in this time of crisis. But, yeah, I'd like to bring on Mr. Michael Anthony Chavez to the show. How you doing, man? Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, what's up, Tanner? I'm doing good, man. Just trying to survive in these wild times, especially up here in the Bay Area. Things are a little crazy, but we're doing everything we can to just, help out these communities that are being affected. And I just encourage anyone else listening to donate or help out, clean up around your neighborhood if any shit's gone down. And, let's just get through this together.
Absolutely. I think down here is even worse than up in your area.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everything's fucked up, but yeah, man, it's anywhere people can help. That's all. That's all I'm about.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And hopefully we can entertain some, you guys out there listening. We always appreciate, all the support, especially in our metal community. It's all or even music community. So any support is good support for me. Even bad support. No such thing as, I don't know. I don't think there's anything such thing as bad publicity. So, anyway, man, thanks so much for coming on the show. So, how this works is I'm going to go through literally your entire career and see where,
okay.
how, what brought you to the point that you're talking to me on the phone here.
Brought me to the dance.
Yeah, that's right. So, if you're ready, man, I'd love to get started with you.
Yeah. You want me to just kick it off?
Oh, no. This is. I'll start it off.
Man.
So, how I always like to, start these things. Tell me the first time you remember hearing music.
Oh my God, that can go back to the minute I popped out of the womb. I mean, Cops was on the TV when I was born. Like I remember hearing, I was told that theme song was literally playing as I was coming out, but I've been around music my whole damn life. From the minute, I came out of the womb to the minute I was out of the hospital. My dad was bumping Funkadelic tapes in the car when I was younger. But I mean, when I first consciously, really paid attention, man, it's so hard to pinpoint. I just remember as a kid just hearing so many different cassette tapes in the car. My dad had Zapp and Roger, Funkadelic, Bob Marley and the Wailers, Bee Gees, just things like that. A lot of old school funk, a lot of R&B and stuff. That's what I remember hearing, as a kid.
And what what attracted you to that specific type of music? Obviously you were jamming to it because your dad, but did you have like a nostalgic connection with them because you were trying to bond with your pops or anything like that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think no matter what, when I was a kid, I was just going to be around loud music. That's just how my family's always been. We always, if there's a party, we got a DJ, it's just loud ass, funk and old school music. But I think for me, if, to pinpoint one day is really hard, but for me, one song that really I can pinpoint on and go back to and remember that as a child is Flashlight by Funkadelic or Parliament. And it was just something about the punchy bass line, man. I don't know if you're familiar with that song, but Lucy Collins does some insane shit with the synthesizers and the bass and everything. I think for me, it was the punchiness and just the driving force that those musicians had that just, really got me interested. So I don't know what it was about it. I also had a lot of musician uncles growing up around me too, so it's just that top quality musicianship's always kind of been valued as far as stuff we would listen to. And, they always preach to me about the different musicians of the time and stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of that funk stuff that attracted me as a kid, the punchiness and the abrasiveness of the music.
And how old were you around this time?
Oh, God. I had to be infant, 3, 4, 5 years old the first time I was hearing this stuff. And then, I just hear it more as I get older. And then, my family tried to put me up on information, stuff about guys from back in the day. But yeah, this was just music I heard growing up from the time I could just interpret thought, basically.
And it's interesting that you brought up that your family obviously was very musical, meaning that your uncles and stuff had, they played in bands from what I'm gathering.
Yeah, so my uncles Johnny and David were both they were both studio musicians up here. They were around San Francisco back in the late '60s and the '70s when Santana was just coming up and doing jams in Dolores Park. My uncles were there for that, and they didn't have any one specific band that I could like send you a record of, but they were just guys just jamming, doing studio stuff or doing live gigs and whatnot at the jazz clubs on Broadway that used to be around in San Francisco, or playing or going to shows at the Winterland and the Fillmore back then. So yeah, they really kind of shaped me in a way and kind of molded me into being the musician I am today, even before I ever heard metal or any kind of rock and roll, really.
Well, did you mention that they played on albums per se? What kind of records did they kind of play on?
My Uncle David always bragged to me. I forget what the hell the name of his group was, but he had like one album that came out in like the '70s or something like that. But I always try to look it up. I can never find it. They were never like guys that were dedicated to like one band. They were always just kind of around in the city and just hanging around different guys like Neil Schon and Carlos Santana and stuff like that. I know my Uncle David has done some session work for James Brown, like live, sometime in Las Vegas back in the day, but none of it's like anything you can look up. It's so crazy. Like they have all these stories always tell me about, doing fill-in gigs. She can't find that stuff on the internet, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, like, the album that you're talking about with your uncles on it, what kind of style was it? I'm just trying to get some of your background. Was it a funk?
Yeah, they were
funk
more
style?
into like the soul. No, man, they were like into like soul and R&B, like even kind of before funk was really a thing. They were more into like the Motown like kind of sound, things like that. My Uncle David's a huge like blues guy. Like he really like got me into the roots of like what rock and roll is, and just the foundations of it, really getting me into Charlie Parker's and Muddy Waters and things like that. Yeah, he's a real big proponent of that type of stuff. So yeah, they were very old school type of dudes. Like, yeah, they're definitely like about the soul and R&B type of sound for sure.
Well, do you remember ever seeing them live or anything per se, or do you remember like the first time you kind of, they kind of taught you how to play a note?
We would always have like family parties, and then like my Uncle Johnny, my Uncle David would get together, and they would set up like a little show in the backyard. Like they'd have a PA system and the amps, and then have their friend who's a drummer come over, and that was basically like a couple family parties we would have where they would just play music. And then eventually my other Uncle Johnny, I would he lived close to me. My Uncle David actually lives in Anaheim, but my Uncle Johnny lived close to me, and so I would just be like, teach me how to play. Like I would beg him, let's just teach me how to play like this Bob Marley song or something. He didn't know what it was, but yeah, so my Uncle Johnny was really he was really important to me as far as like my development in music. I definitely came to him for pointers and stuff with the basic stuff, and then later on when I was more advanced, my other Uncle David like really helped me with like my improv and just figuring out the whole steps and the half steps, basically like breaking it down that simple for me on guitar.
Well, what was your first instrument?
My first instrument was actually trumpet growing up. When I was in middle school, I joined the school band, and I had to pick an instrument. Trumpet was that before I ever got my hands on the guitar. But it wasn't too long after that, actually, that I did start playing guitar. So trumpet and guitar actually kind of came around the same time for me.
And why the trumpet? Why not? Because I remember during these days. Well, I remember during these days, and mine, I picked the flute because I thought it would be the easiest thing, and it wasn't. So why the trumpet? Just was it the overall sound?
I don't know. I think it was that. I think back then I just thought it might have been the easier of all the instruments, because like I remember seeing people try to learn how to play saxophone, and I was just like, I could not imagine trying to like make sounds with a reed and all that stuff. Like it freaked me out. So I guess like I don't know. Something about trumpet just I really like, and I still do to this day. Like I haven't played trumpet since high school, but definitely have an appreciation for it after all those years of playing it, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, and it's probably less intimidating for you to hold a trumpet in your hands.
Oh yeah, dude. Especially when I did marching band in high school and shit. So they really like whipped me into shape and made me stand up straight with the horn out and everything, or making sure I'm not holding it down or anything. So yeah, man, I have a deep.
You did it for a couple years.
The trumpet?
Correct.
Yeah, man, I did that for a couple of years in middle school, and then I put it down, and then later on in high school, I picked it back up for marching band. So yeah, I had about like maybe 4 or 5 years experience with it. But man, it's been almost a decade since I picked one up, so I don't know what it would sound like today. Maybe one day you might hear me fuck around on a trumpet on a Hemotoxin record. I don't know.
Dude, you just might. I don't know. Anything's possible. So when did you gravitate towards like the guitar after the trumpet or before?
So it was around the same time. Like I said, my family is very musical, and I had my uncles who were into R&B, and then I had my grandpa on the other side of the family who was more into flamenco and like classical styles like that, and a lot of Mexican folk songs and stuff. And so he always had an acoustic guitar around, and so I always remember as a kid I would just hit the strings or something and just like pick it up, and he noticed it, I liked it. And so around the same time I picked up trumpet, and like, God, I had to be like 6th grade. That same Christmas he ended up buying me a guitar. So yeah, it was maybe like a couple months after I started playing trumpet, I got my first guitar. It was like a Yamaha classical, like nylon string sort of guitar. Yeah, man, that was December 2006. I'll never forget it. It's when I first started, and
oh wow,
he took over everything.
Well, you were what, 11, 12 at this point?
I was 11 years old. Yeah,
that's
when
crazy.
I first picked up guitar. Yeah, man, it's been a long time.
So after picking up the guitar, what were some of like your first bands that you were kind of interested in around, guitar-wise?
Yeah, I mean, so around that time I started getting into bands like, just the basic ones, Sabbath, Zeppelin, the Beatles were really big for me because that was another band my dad kind of pushed on me. And so like, my uncles were familiar with the Beatles, and so I remember the first riff I ever learned was actually Day Tripper by the Beatles, and from there just went on, and then I learned like the basics. I think it would be like Smoke on the Water, and like man, I forget what Led Zeppelin song I was even trying to learn back then, but I remember I taught myself Electric Funeral from Sabbath, and I was just like, so like that was like a little bit of like a turning point where I was like, I can actually kind of do something with this thing, like, because I was really into those bands at the time, and like what Tony Iommi was doing and what Jimmy Page, like all those guitar heroes, it was like magic to me. At a certain point when I started, I felt like it was almost impossible to be at that level. And so when I figured out fucking Electric Funeral, I was like, wait a minute, like there might actually be something here. And then, yeah, I just took off from there and pretty much never fucking looked back.
Did you start noticing around your area there was more musicians, or was it just kind of you and that was kind of it?
Well, back then it was a little more spread out. There was like a scene that, there was a metal scene for sure going on. I just wasn't really in it yet. But as far as like in my immediate area, there were definitely back then, as far as I can tell, compared to now, there were a lot more people playing music in my area. Like, I had a kid up the street who had like a metalcore band back in the day, or like, just there was a lot of just different music going on around here back then. I wasn't too connected yet when I first started, but there were definitely people around, a lot more than there are today. That's for sure. You definitely had like, it's like the thrash revival bands were coming up around 2006, 2007, before I really got into the scene. So that stuff was going on, but I didn't really know about it, but it was definitely, stuff was happening.
Now, when did you start jamming with other people?
Oh man, I had been trying pretty much since I started. Like I just find like I remember I found like a neighbor kid who, like I told you, he had like a little metalcore band, and I tried to jam with him, but I was not there yet, and he told me I sucked, and like I got so pissed. I was like, I gotta be better than this kid. So throughout like, all of like middle school, I was just trying to find people, and I couldn't find anybody at my school specifically that played. I got my friend to like pick up bass and start playing, but it wasn't until high school that I met my drummer now, Brandon, and he was like the first dude I like really, really like jammed with, and we would play songs together that we both knew. And so it was like I was like 14 in ninth grade. First time I like really, really jammed with him.
And what attracted you to his playing?
Oh my God, dude. Oh, geez, you're talking. This is like a decade-long like musician relationship here, man. For Brandon, he's always been like a top quality like drummer. Like even when we were 14, like we were at the level we were at, but he was still like above and beyond like what I had experienced at that point with any other musician. And so I think for me and our friend Daniel too, who we were jamming with, he was on guitar. I think for all of us, we all recognized in each other that we had a passion to do this, and that we just wanted to play music essentially, and just play the music we wanted to hear. And we, it was just something we were all dedicated to, and that's what I had been searching for, since I started playing, because I wanted, I just wanted to make music, just because I've seen my uncles do it growing up, and now it's kind of my turn to start, sowing my oats, so to speak. So yeah, I think that was really what it was. Is I recognized he had a passion for it. All three of us did back then. So yeah, that's what really did it. And that's why he's still my drummer to this day, because, we just both have the similar ear for certain things you want to hear. He likes to play drums, I like to play guitar, and it's almost just that simple.
Now, did he push you around, the beginning stages too? Did you start immediately noticing, like, as you were playing, there's just an instant chemistry, and since his level was kind of up, or, more up than what you were kind of at that time, did it kind of inspire you? So to speak?
Oh God, yes, 100%, man. He, I remember, I'll never forget. Like we would have songs back then. We would rehearse like almost every day because our friend's house was right next to the high school. So, we would go to school all day, and then afterwards go to our friend Daniel's house and jam for 3 or 4 hours. And so, when we were trying to record like our first like demo and stuff, he had the songs down so well that he would just record it like with nothing. He would just record a take, and then that would be the take we record, guitars to. He'd have no reference, no click, no guitar, nothing. He would just play the songs from memory because he was just that in tune. And so that, seeing that and just being around that, like really pushed me to like, take my shit to the next level. And that's what it did, and we ended up, creating Hemotoxin together.
Now, what was your first band name?
So our first band name, this was before I wasn't in control of this project. This was something that we kind of tagged along with our friend. Oh, actually I did. So him and Daniel had started this band before I'd ever met them, but it was called Aeon of Death. We were more like a melodic sort of death metal band, kind of more like the Children of Bodom sort of stuff that was happening back then.
Right, that was hugely popular. The Norther, no problem.
Yeah, like In Flames and all. We were in that vein. We played on like Drop C and all that stuff. So, that's what we started with. And I was more into the thrash stuff for sure. Like, when I was like 14, I was into like Slayer and Sepultura and Cannibal Corpse and, just all the super like, staple thrash and death metal bands. I like Children of Bodom. I like the melodic stuff. I don't like it as much as I like the thrash stuff, which is why Hemotoxin was made in the first place. But, we had a good time playing the Aeon of Death stuff for sure. It was really fun, especially playing in the drop tuning. I was super against it at first, but it turned out to be actually kind of fun and a lot easier. But yeah, and didn't stick around for too long.
Well, and you said that your drummer and bass player had a separate band name. Was that the same as Aeon of Death?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was a little confusing. So Daniel was a guitar player.
Okay.
We both play guitar, him and I. And him and Brandon had a band before I had met them. and it wasn't exactly Aeon of Death yet, but once I had hooked up with them and we had kind of like started churning out ideas, that eventually became Aeon of Death.
Gotcha.
So it was a thing where I kind of tacked on a couple months in, but yeah.
And then it kind of morphed into Hemotoxin?
Well, the thing with that is so we did Aeon of Death for about a year, almost a year and a half, and then I was having some issues with my shoulder because I had a Randy Rhoads V back then, and I used to wear it so low, like damn near to my knees, and it was causing me shoulder issues like at 15, and I was like, yeah, this ain't right. So I was kind of taking some time away from shows. Like I think I'd taken like a full month off because we were trying to, go really hard with shows, especially local shows. We're kids. We don't have anything better to do. So we're just trying to get out there. But my shoulder was bothering me so bad. And like, there were just tensions within the band. Daniel was changing songs all the time. And, we could never keep a set list. We could never like keep recorded songs. Like everything was always changing. And so I was just like, I don't want to do this. And I don't even have creative control over anything in this band. So I just ended up quitting after a year and a half. And then out of that is what became Hemotoxin. I had dropped a couple riffs in the band before, in Aeon of Death, that ended up being in like Hemotoxin songs. So yeah, like I said, I'd spend a year and a half in Aeon of Death. And then after a while, I had the shoulder issues and then the creativity issues, and I just ended up leaving. And then out of that came Hemotoxin.
Well, now explain the process of Hemotoxin. So after was Aeon of Death a 4-piece at the time?
Yeah, so we were a 4-piece back then. We actually the lineup for Aeon of Death was pretty much the same lineup we had on Biological Enslavement, just minus Daniel, pretty much. So me on guitar, Brandon drums, Daniel guitar too, and then our friend Nathan on bass.
Now explain to me how Hemotoxin actually got started, because if you guys had like a sort of like a falling out in Aeon of Death, I'm not understanding how you guys got brought back together. So explain that whole process.
So I had quit Aeon of Death basically and started Hemotoxin, and our first drummer Joey was really pushing me to jam with him, and so that's what I did. I quit Aeon of Death and I went to go jam with my friend Joey with these songs that I had written, and so that's how it started. Aeon of Death was still trying to continue on with Brandon and everyone else, and I was on my own doing Hemotoxin with a new drummer Joey, and so that version of Hemotoxin existed for about a year until 2011, and then eventually Joey quit. We had a bass player at the time, Josh Sumter, and he was in the band for a long time. But me and Josh for a minute, and then it was kind of almost like when Joey quit, it was like it was meant to happen sort of thing. Because as soon as he quit, like I just hit up Brandon. Like I think I messaged him on Facebook, and I was like, "You're up." Like we had been talking about it for days because I kind of knew Joey was going to leave the band. And so I was just telling Brandon, like, you think you would ever want to do this? And he was like, absolutely. So when Joey left the band, Brandon just fit right in, sort of thing, because Aeon of Death had pretty much stopped at that point. Because to kind of give you like a timeline, Aeon of Death started in 2009. I left Aeon of Death in 2010, and that's when Hemotoxin started. And so Joey was our drummer from 2010 to 2011. And then 2011 is when Brandon jumped into the drummer position. And then 2 years after that, in 2013, our original bass player, Josh Sumter, I actually had to kick him out. He basically had gotten a DUI the night before a really important show. I think we were opening for Vader, actually. We were opening for Vader, and he'd gotten a fucking DUI, and I had to, it was the biggest crowd I ever played in front of. One of the most important shows at the time, and I was just like, man, like, you're fucking up, like, you gotta go. And then that's when Nathan jumped into the bass player position. So it was about like a 3-year process to go from Aeon of Death to Hemotoxin, but that's basically how it played out.
Now explain the name of Hemotoxin. Explain like the origins and kind of who came up with it, and how did you come up with it, or how did whoever came up with it?
I came up with it, and it's so random how I came up with it, but so basically I was just searching for a name. I had written like a couple riffs. There's a video of it on fucking like on our YouTube page. It's still up, I think. When I wrote the first Hemotoxin song, and so I think it was like July or something. I didn't have a name yet. I just had like one song, and I was like, what the hell am I gonna call this thing? And so I'm on my computer, I'm on Wikipedia, and I just hit random article a couple of times, and I come up to Hemotoxin, and I'm like, what's this? And like reading through it, and like, you know, basically it's just, you know, it's poison and snake's venom that turns your blood into jelly, basically. And I saw there's a clip of it on YouTube where somebody takes a little bit of blood and drops some Hemotoxin in it, and it literally turns into fucking like solid jelly. It's fucking horrifying. And I was like, this is brutal as shit. Like, like I just saw that video. I was like, Jesus, like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like, has anybody used this yet? And so I go on Metal Archives and I search Hemotoxin. There's nothing. Go on YouTube and search it. There's nothing. So I'm like, that's my fucking band name right there.
Dude, I had the same process for Madras. I can tell you that much. It was
Are you serious?
It was the same thing, dude. No, it was like literally the same thing. Wikipedia, had to go on Metal Archives, had to go on YouTube because YouTube was relatively new back then. And yeah right. But you know, dude, that's awesome. We have the same kind of story. That rules.
Yeah,
now
I had to make sure no one else had it.
Yeah, well, dude, absolutely. And then you have to copyright and all that stuff. But and what was kind of your scene around the 2010 and 2011? Because from my understanding, thrash scene was massive, right? And was there an actual metalcore scene still happening?
So for us, up here in the Bay Area, it still is like this. It's very, I don't want to say it's divided. It's more like segments of areas, because the Bay Area is pretty spread out. And so, you know, when you talk about the Bay Area scene, you're incorporating like 5 different areas: the North Bay, the actual cities like San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, and then the East Bay, which is where I'm at. So it's 4 areas really. I might be missing some specifics, but that's generally how people think of it.
So Santa Rosa and all that stuff is what, East Bay?
Santa Rosa would be considered North Bay.
North Bay, okay.
Yeah, East Bay would be considered like everything behind Oakland. So like, you know, Berkeley and Richmond and further inland, more things like that. And then, like I said, you got the cities, Oakland, San Francisco, and then you got like the South Bay Peninsula area, which would be like San Jose and San Mateo and things like that. Those are a little bit far away from each other, but generally that's like the area. Those are the general areas people refer to. So for me, I grew up in the East Bay scene back then, and I had access to like Oakland and San Francisco, so I was around that too a little bit. But my home was the East Bay. So back then it was still very spread out. Everywhere kind of had its own thing going on as far as, you know, the 4 different areas in the Bay. But you know, back then, metalcore was huge in the East Bay. There was this band Antagony back in the day that was around that really made it huge out here. You know, they were around before when I was still like a little kid when they came out. But they were huge for a lot of local guys, and their influence and their presence really, like, you know, left a mark. And it spawned bands like All Shall Perish and things like that, and Oblivion and stuff. So there's definitely like a little bit of a metalcore, deathcore thing going on for a while. I know, like, in the cities and stuff, in the other pockets of the East Bay, there's a lot of thrash going on too. You know, there's a big revival 2005, 2006, 7, 8, and, you know, all the way through to the end of the decade. And so I was around that too. My first local show was actually Tidal Wave, I think 11 in 2008, and there was like a free show where you know, Exodus headlined, and then you had Hyrax on the bill, and you had Detente, which is like a super obscure ass like old band.
Dawn Crosby, she rules.
Yeah, man. Rest in peace. One of the greatest fucking thrash singers that ever lived, Dawn Crosby. And them, you know, Psychosomatic, Attitude Adjustment. I saw Havoc back then, and Zombie Holocaust and things like that.
Was Witch Haven on that bill too? if I'm not
Chavez
mistaken.
played a couple years. They played a couple years later, but
okay.
they played in like 2010, but I was there for that too.
Now
there was.
Not to cut you off, but for those of you who are listening, Tidal Wave was like a show out in the Bay Area where it was like I don't know how to explain it. Like it was like Stonehenge. Like if maybe you can explain it a little bit better than
dude.
I
Yeah,
can.
it looks like that, huh? So it was in the spot called McLaren Park in the city, and McLaren Park has just kind of always been this little amphitheater place. If you actually go back and watch the Heathen video for Kill the King, they filmed that there. You can see like a little Stonehenge background, but it was just a free show that this dude, I don't want to give away his name. He's kind of a secretive kind of guy, so I'm not gonna like put him out there like that. But
did you mean Set Me Free?
Yeah. It is Set Me Free.
Okay. Okay.
Different cover, but this dude and a couple other friends, they would get sponsors. They would get shit tons of sponsors and just put on these free shows in McLaren Park in the city. And as far as I knew, I remember hearing the history briefly, but this had been like a thing they'd been doing for like a decade before I'd even gone. Like I think it started in '99 or something like that, or even before that. But Tidal Wave was just like a free show for thrash. Essentially, it was as if they had kind of taken the concept of Thrash of the Titans and made it like an annual thing. And so like I felt super fortunate that I got to like experience that, especially like I was like 14 and like some dude stage dive and landed right on me, so I get my first pit experience and all that shit. But Tidal Wave was just a free show, just basically showcasing thrash metal essentially, almost exclusively, and like it was fucking a great time. And I'm really grateful I got to experience it.
When was kind of Slaughter by the Water? Was that a little bit later?
Yeah, that was a couple of years later. I know Nick from Zombie Holocaust. I don't know if he was you would have to ask him, honestly. I don't know if he was inspired by Tidal Wave because I know they played on it. But yeah, a couple of years later, Nick, organized the first Tidal Wave that was at Oakland Metro, and it was the same concept, just a festival that celebrates thrash metal, old and new. And I think like compared to Tidal Wave, the one thing that Nick did better was make it a bigger deal with bigger bands, and also he kind of gave an avenue for both the local bands that deserved it and also like out of town bands and more regional bands, and then the bigger headliner acts like I think Exodus headlined like the one we played, so, and Autopsy and things like that. So I think Slaughter by the Water like just as important as Tidal Wave in my opinion. But yeah, I'm fucking so grateful for guys like Nick and who set things like that for the community, because we don't get a lot of that up here.
Which is really strange because the Bay Area is known for speed metal and stuff, and it seems like obviously LA had Thrasho de Mayo, which I've covered extensively with the Fuel by Fire guys and how that got started. But it was just really It was really cool just to see like different pockets of the same thing, right? Now the Bay Area, obviously thrash was dominating. That you still had a little bit of metalcore, and then you kind of had bands like say Hemotoxin in the Bay Area that was kind of a little different. Like you guys and us kind of you always reminded me of us kind of thing up in that specific area. So talk to me a little bit about how you approached Hemotoxin differently from what was going on during the Bay Area days, around the high point of it all.
Right. Well, yeah, we kind of like tried to hop on a little bit too late. Things kind of started to die down around like 2012, 2013 as far as like the thrash revival thing that was happening was going. But when it came to that and how I approach Hemotoxin, I wanted to honestly make something that both the old school like balding metalhead with the denim vest, or the kid who's trying to look like the dude from the 80s with the battle jacket or whatever, I wanted to make something for them, but also make something at the same time that the deathcore dude with the gauges could also like get into. I wanted to make Hemotoxin just as accessible as possible in the realm of metal, not trying to like make any like ballads or any like kind of thing like that, but trying to just more so sonically make it something that when the person hears it, they don't necessarily feel like it has to fit their mold. You take the music and you're just like, Jesus, this is some fucking sick shit, regardless of whatever your preference is, as far as like, if you're into metalcore, if you're into thrash, or if you're into black, I just want it, whoever listens to it, I want them to enjoy it. And I want to put something in there for everybody, because I do enjoy everything, I love thrash metal, I love death metal, I love hardcore, I like some deathcore, not a lot, but I do like some deathcore, some metalcore that's cool out there, like Walls of Jericho. So I'm definitely like, I have a wide variety of influences for sure, and so I always try to just put them all into Hemotoxin in such a concentrated way that that people don't feel like I'm trying to like harp on one certain sound. And sometimes I accomplished that, and sometimes I didn't. So yeah, but that's just how I approached it.
Well, how did you approach your songwriting? Because it's a little bit different, but it's still straight ahead. Like you still have the verse, pre-chorus, chorus type of thing, but you approached it a little bit differently. So walk me through a process of kind of how you write a Hemotoxin song.
Well, man, it's always kind of changed over the years, but basically, it just depends what my start point is. It depends what the motivation is. Sometimes I'll start with something and just shit out an idea in like an hour and just have a whole song written out. Sometimes it's one riff and that's it, and it takes me years to find the rest of the song. There's a track on the newest album, Unreality, that was just that. I had written that riff. The first riff in Unreality was written in 2014, and I didn't have the rest of the song written until like 2018. It literally took me 4 years to figure out the rest of it. So, typically what I do is I'll have just a couple riffs or some ideas and like, a catchy drum beat in my head or something, and then I'll just write it down and just see what fits with it best. Typically that's how I do it. Sometimes there's special situations like Unreality. But yeah, for the most part, I'll just kind of sit down with an idea and just try to, fit things around that idea, as far as like, if I have a verse riff, how is the chorus going to complement this? Or if, what kind of solo should I do here? Or, just figuring out what works best with this melody I just created on guitar. Because I never, as much as I've written riffs, I've more so tried to create just melodies with my riffs, and then, figure out the root notes of what I'm doing, and then bring it down to more of a riff idea.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and obviously you're putting your cadences as far as lyrical goes with the riff, like the Sabbath approach, right? Like it matches the riff.
Oh, dude, fuck yeah. I can't do it any other way, man. I do these fucking screaming vocals. I just got to go with the flow, essentially. You and I we're both huge Dio guys, and I wish I could sing like him, but, man, I just fucking cannot.
Me too, man.
As hard as I try.
So let's go back real quick. So after like the Hemotoxin, the name was developed, you guys started kind of jamming. When was the first time you went into an actual recording studio? Like, and walk me through the process kind of after Homie, just went in on drums and just fucking nailed it without a click, or you guys playing guitar to it.
That was Brandon back in the Alien Death days, and that was basically like we had a friend of ours, Chris, his dad Ken, who actually his name's Ken Savari. He was the first bass player in Autopsy. He quit the band right before they recorded the first album, Charter Severed Survival. Yeah, so he had kind of bragged to us about that, and so we're just like, oh sweet, and like, yeah, he's got a recording studio. Like, okay, cool. So he brought like he brought a 16-track recorder, actually, like a mobile 16-track recorder with the tapes on it and everything. I couldn't believe it. And we mic'd up the drum set, and he recorded drums straight to the tape. And that's how Brandon did it the first time. And then later on, we went back to his place. He took the tapes and, turned them from analog to digital and transferred it to his computer. And then it was such a weird process. Brandon laid down the drums like that. And then me and Daniel just sat there with both our guitars plugged in to like virtual amps, and we just played to the drums like we would as if we were just jamming. And that was like our first little demo thing we had made. And you know, the disappointing thing about it is I don't have it. Copies don't exist because we never finished it. But later on, we actually went on and recorded a single that it's on the Hemotoxin SoundCloud now. It's called "In the Eyes of Death." But we did a similar. We basically did a similar like recording process. Brandon did the drums by himself, and then Daniel went in and recorded all the guitars. I don't think we had a click still, but yeah, that's basically how it was. You know, just jamming endlessly, and then once we were super comfortable with the songs, Brandon would just play them and record them to nothing, and then Daniel would, you know, play the guitars over it, and we made it work for one song at least. But yeah, that was how my first recording experience was.
And what did you learn from this process as opposed to, say, like some of your first EPs, like the Divinity and Torture EP, and then, you know, going on to pretty much the Between Forever and the End, you know, LP kind of thing?
It's funny you mentioned those specifically, because they're all such the recording situations for each of those releases were so starkly different, because like I said, Brandon in our first little band, he recorded the drums by himself with nothing. And then a couple of years later, when we got Hemotoxin going and we recorded Divinity and Torture, which was that was the first recording I did with Brandon in Hemotoxin. We did that, we rented out a studio in Walnut Creek, and we just set up like a live show, basically, like with amps by the drums and everything, so you could get that perfect fucking guitar bleed into your drum mix, which, you know, was just something I learned from that experience. But yeah, no, we recorded that live, basically just like together on a little stage as if we were playing a show. And then Between Forever and the End, which was, I want to say like a little bit over a year later when we recorded that, that's when we really started to like get into an actual recording process. Because I had hooked up with Scott Fuller. He was playing drums for Abysmal Dawn back then, and I had met him at Slaughter by the Water, and he lived in Santa Rosa at the time, and he just told me like, "Hey man, I record bands, like anytime you guys want to record something, like hit me up." And I sure as hell did. And yeah, we recorded Between Forever and the End with Scott, and you know, it really just like, that was the eye opener for me for sure. You know, I learned some stuff recording our EPs, but I think for me the real lesson came when I got in there with somebody who actually knew what they were doing, and you know, it just, you know, just figuring out tempo mapping and getting down drum tones and getting samples, and you know, just little nitpicky things like that. And like, just so many, like, Scott Fuller, I will tell you right now, taught me more about recording than almost any of my uncles taught me about music. Like, he had that much of an impact on me for sure. Like, as far as like, you know, just everything, having new strings, having new heads on the drums, having, you know, just everything lined up and ready to go essentially. And yeah, that's how he recorded Between Forever and the End. And you know, just he really just, you know, exposed a lot of things that we did in the recording process that were fucked up. And you know, the actual song on Between Forever and the End, Divinity and Torture, you go listen to that, it's fucked up because we recorded it fucked up because we didn't know what we were doing. And so, yeah, getting, you know, we did our first couple recordings, and, you know, I honestly, I learned how to plug my guitar into something and put a mic on it and hit record, and that's about it. But it wasn't until he hooked up with Scott that I really, you know, started to learn the process of everything that goes into recording, from before you even hop in the studio to when you're, you know, deep into shit, you know, recording. He really just through experience taught me a lot.
And now walk me through, because you're also the vocalist of the group, and I'm just kind of wondering, you know, you're a guitar player. What made you decide to either have to be the vocalist or that you wanted to do vocals for the band?
Well, growing up, you know, I was big fucking Metallica fan, big Slayer fan, big Sepultura fan, and you know, what do those guys do? They play their instrument and they sang. And so even before that, like, I was a huge fan of Bob Marley, and my image of Bob Marley was him with a guitar on stage, you know, singing his songs. So I think for me, it was always something that was so fundamental. I just never questioned it. Like, I know a lot of times when bands get started, you know, I was like, all right, we got to have a separate singer. And for me, you know, I don't know if it was just pure ego or just like me just being a curious kid wanted to try it out, but I wanted to play guitar and sing just because I wanted to play guitar and sing. Like, you know, I've seen my idols do it, seen my uncles do it. And so I was just like, you know, like, it's my turn. Like, let me do this too. Like, I don't know, something about just seeing it my whole life. Like, it felt so natural to me. And I don't know. I didn't even, you know, there was no like preconceived notion of like rock star bullshit with singers in my head at all. Like, I wasn't even thinking about that back then. I don't know, naturally, I picked up the guitar and now I'm the vocalist. Like, that's just how I felt back then. It's confusing to even think back on now because I don't even like really understand what the hell, like, I was thinking, like, why didn't I just get a vocalist? I don't know. I just wanted to play guitar and sing that bad, I guess.
And so let's go to the Between Forever and the End LP, right? So you're working with Scott. This is your first time literally working with like a producer who kind of, you know, knows a little bit more, right, than some of your past ones.
Right.
And I'm just curious as to the writing process for this specific record and kind of how you approached it as opposed to, say, the EPs.
Right. Well, Between Forever and the End was a little, I guess, unique for the time because it was half songs that we had already written. That it was kind of like a thing where, like, I had always grown up, you know, listening to albums from bands, and I'd always noticed, like, hey, like, 2 or 3 of the songs on this LP were on this EP before, and they sound different and they sound updated. And so for Between Forever and the End, I kind of wanted to, I don't know, it was just like the guitar player singer thing. Like, it was just something I saw as a necessary measure to take. So half of Between Forever and the End is just old songs that we basically re-recorded for it. And then the other half of it is these songs I've written for the album. And so the process behind those were just sitting with Brandon and jamming out ideas. Well, all of us really, back then when we wrote Between Forever and the End, we were basically in my dad's garage. And we had this kid Hunter on guitar, and Josh Sumter was still on bass. And so, you know, we would do it just kind of like old school, you know, everyone sit in the room, or in this case, in the sweaty garage, and let's just work out a song. You got a riff? What do you think of this? You know, just throwing out ideas like that. And so a lot of those songs came together. I know I wrote Confined to Desolation. That was like it's just a song I brought. Like, I wrote it, like, almost all the riffs I had, like, tracked out. I didn't have access to, like, Guitar Pro back then, so I was just, like, recording them all, and somehow, I think I recorded them, like, on an interface or something like that if I had. But, you know, that first song, Beyond Creation, was, like, a collaborative effort between all of us, sort of thing, where, you know, just, you got a riff, what do you think of this, what do you think of that? And then Confined to Desolation was more like my song. Andrea was like a song that I had written. Yeah, man. So it was kind of all over the place on that one.
And you did this purely independent, right? So I'm wondering kind of what the reception for this specific album was for you guys. I mean, this was obviously well before you guys probably knew what PR was or how to even promote it properly. Yeah. Before you got signed, right? But I'm wondering what the reaction was like, mainly in your like hometown kind of thing.
That's exactly what it was. Because, like you said, I had no idea about PR back then. I had, I had people that claimed they were gonna try and help me that never came through for me. So a lot of times, you know, I was really especially when Hemotoxin first started, and this is around the time you met me too, but. You know, I was just a kid trying to start a band and just try to put out music. And, like, I didn't have anybody to, like, really help me with the business side of it. My my uncles were musicians, but they weren't businessmen. You know, they didn't know any of that side of it, so they weren't really any help. And you know, like I said, people would claim they would try to help me, but to no avail. You know, they would just kind of, you know, ditch me. And so yeah, for that first record, a lot of it was just a local response. You know, it was just sort of like when you're in a local band, you record your shit, and then you go to shows and you know, when you have demos, you just give them out. And that's almost kind of how Between Forever and the End played out pretty much. You know, I had, back then I was receiving some federal money, because, you know, some personal issues, but I had some money. So, you know, I decided to take half of it and invest it into recording my first album. And so that's what we did. You know, I paid for all the studio time, paid for all the CDs and everything. And then we just, you know, as best as we could at the time, we tried to, you know, tour, but it wasn't really a tour. We would just play a lot of local shows. And we had a US tour kind of, you know, loosely planned out in 2012 with our friends in Deceive. And I don't want to name names, but there was a guy in the LA area that claimed he was going to help us book this tour. And then I want to say it was like 3 or 4 weeks before we were actually supposed to start this thing. We had like maybe 2 shows booked, one in New Mexico and one in Chicago, and that was it. And then this guy hit us up and just said, "Hey, I'm abandoning the project. I'm not booking your tour. Good luck." And that was it. And so, you know, at that point, I had spent all my money on the album and getting it pressed. I had no vehicle, I had, you know, no way to get out and tour, so we had to cancel it. And it's just like one of those fucking crushing moments. But we still tried to rise above it and just, you know, get out into our local scene. And that's what we did. And the response was, locally, it was great. You know, we just, as much as I could, just give anybody a CD, or I was selling them for like maybe like $5 back then. But yeah, you know, as far as like a grand scale of putting an album out goes, like it didn't do that great because I didn't know what I was doing. But as far as the local scene goes, like it did pretty good. You know, it really helped get us out there, and it helped establish us in more, you know, sectors of the Bay Area and San Jose and Santa Rosa and things like that. We really started to make some noise, and people started to really know who we are. So yeah, I'd say locally Between Forever and the End really like established us, and just like, you know, at least out here for the most part, showed people that, you know, we're fucking here, and we're here to fucking play some riffs for you.
And it seems like probably, you know, the promoters probably saw you guys as like, oh, these guys are kind of serious. Now, I remember either getting the CD. I want to say hopefully I bought it from you guys because I'd like to support bands and not just playing one. But I believe I bought it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here.
I'm pretty sure you did.
But I remember loving it. I don't remember. I think because I was friends with the Deceive guys. And JC obviously, you know, later became our guitar player for a minute, and we are extremely grateful, you know, to him and for him for that. But I remember, I think that's how you guys came on my radar, and it was like, wow, there's another band kind of doing what we're doing, except in their area. Now, explain the artwork, because that was kind of my first eye-opening experience. It was like looking at the cover and like not really understanding it. I'm just gonna be completely honest. But I loved it. Like I loved the songs, and just explain to me the concept of the album artwork.
So first you have to thank another member of Deceived / member of Condemned, Adam Watson, for that, because we had original artwork that there was a alternative cover, I'll say, that was made for Between Forever and the End, and I showed it to Adam, and he was like, "No, don't use this. Like, straight up, do not use this. Like, this is garbage." Like, he put me in contact basically with this dude from Sweden who did free artwork. His name's Sammy. It's called like 123 Design or something like that. But it was just clip art, that the dude was making, and he offered it for free. And for me, the concept basically Between Forever and the End was all kind of based around everyone's kind of fear of the apocalypse around 2012. You know, it was a big thing back then, and I always felt like, you know, people were either talking about how bad shit was going to get, or how, you know, the world's going to come to an end come December or whatever of 2012. And then there were other people talking about how it's going to bring about the golden age and how it's going to be this whole new era of like information and technology and all this stuff. And so, you know, I was 17, 18 at the time, and I don't know, that thought just came across my head, like we're always between forever and the end. We're always, you know, we're always talking about how bad things are going to be and how we're all going to fucking die. And then there's another, you know, side that's always talking about how things are going to get better. And so I think I was just trying to get that point across of my confusion as a teenager and how I saw the world back then. And so, you know, the artwork has the guy in the picture frame putting his hand up because, you know, he's between forever and the end. He's trying to break through and figure out like where do I stand here? And so,
right, they just told you the wrong year. It was 2020 and not 2012.
Right, so, yeah, dude, we just had to wait like 8 years for this shit to really crack off.
That's right. Awesome. Okay, well, so explain the next process after Between Forever and the End. So you guys start gigging afterwards, right? I remember, you know, at least from Madras, we kept coming up to the Bay Area. We played with you guys a couple times, which was fucking awesome.
Hell yeah.
And then you guys kind of got signed afterwards. So walk me through that whole period, like the 2013-14 kind of era.
Right. So at this point, you know, we had put out Between Forever and the End, and, you know, things had gotten rolling. We had started to get a little more press coverage by smaller outlets on the internet. But yeah, you know, it was just basically the natural process going into 2013 that we would make an EP. You know, we started with Divinity and Torture, which was an EP, and then we made a full album. And so I just felt like, you know, let's go in and do another EP. And so we were still hooked up with Scott Fuller at the time. He kind of became like almost like the fifth member of the band, so to speak. You know, I really can't
overstate.
You know, I really can't like how much of an impact Scott had on this band. Like,
overstate
I know
the fact.
he's
I gotcha,
dude. Man, like, I know he's helped out a lot of other bands too, like one from your area, Voices of Ruin. I know he's you know, produced them a bunch. He does this for a lot of local bands and a lot of just younger guys. But yeah, I'm one of those people for sure. Scott Fuller taught me a lot, taught us a lot, and like helped develop our sound and like helped me like I don't even think he'll take credit for this, but he helped me develop my guitar tone overall too, and like how I approached that and just a lot of things. So we hooked up with him for Alchemist EP, and yeah, we just, you know, he was living up in, I think it was Dixon at the time, somewhere in just like the middle of nowhere. We just drove up there. He had a little control room made up, and so we just set up drums and laid it all down, and then we ended up taking the drum tracks home and recording, you know, just DI guitars at home. And then we recorded everything back at home, just vocals, guitars, bass, and sent it over to Scott. He mixed and mastered it, and then yeah, we put that shit on the CD and just, you know, kept doing the same process, playing local shows, trying our best to kind of break out a little bit, get into LA and stuff. But at the time, I don't think I had the confidence to really like go on a tour. I didn't have money, you know, I didn't have any kind of like backing from anybody that, you know, made me feel confident enough to invest, you know, into a van, or, you know, it just wasn't, the cards weren't in the right place yet for us to really go out and like do an extensive tour. So we were just, for me, it was just trying to get out and do as many local shows as we possibly could, and like trying to, you know, go down to LA and break out a little bit that way and just, you know, spread the name a little bit more. And so, you know, it worked. There was a guy around the Bay Area that kind of took care of us and booked us in a lot of good shows. And one of those shows happened to be where we filmed our Alchemist video. And our friend Nico hooked us up with that basically for free. And, you know, we put that out, and then that kind of, you know, with the release of Alchemist EP, we had a distribution deal with some group. They were called Brutal Gear. They're out of Michigan, and basically, like, they would just, you know, send out the EP like to different labels and stuff, and, you know, just it was a whole like distribution process that was just so like it was so deep. I couldn't even get into it, but yeah, they, you know, I'd basically just like give them permission to like make copies of our EP. And somehow, some way through that, it made it to Eric from Unspeakable Acts Records. And yeah, I just woke up one day, I think I was like at an ex's house or something like that, and like on my phone I get a message on the Hemotoxin Facebook page. I was just like, hey, want to sign you guys, sort of thing. I don't even remember exactly what he said, but basically that's how, just read, he liked our music a lot. And at the time Unspeakable Acts was just getting started. I think they only had like one release at the time or something like that. But yeah, Eric said we fit the mold really well. Unspeakable Acts is geared more towards a death thrash like sort of sound. And yeah, he was really into us at the time. He just like, I want to sign you. I was just like, please, like, let's do this. And I was expecting like a whole like contract agreement or something, but my entire relationship with Eric and Unspeakable Acts Records has existed on a handshake deal basically since we started. He just hit me up and he's just been like, hey man, like I want to put out your music, and I'm just like, please do it. And it's been nothing more than that. There's no paperwork between us. We're not like,
they don't own your masters or anything. You're just kind of giving them like your permission to press it. That's awesome. That's what man. We have. We have that deal now after so many years later. So I like it. Not to get off subject, but I really think that's the way to go.
No, go ahead.
No, I just think it's the way to go seriously. For any band.
Definitely. Like I'd fucking hard agree with that, because like you really don't want to give up your master track, especially to someone who's not going to do anything for you. I think there's a lot of people that take advantage of young artists, and me included. This almost happened to me. I can tell you from experience. There's people out here that think there's some sort of money in these new bands, and maybe there is, but it's like you can't, like, some people want to own your masters and then have you pay them for it. It's just like you didn't even help with the writing process. You didn't help with the recording process. Like, there's a lot of shady ass bullshit that goes on in the music industry. But yeah, that was one of the things for me coming up. Like, I did not want to give up my fucking masters to anybody, or like have somebody own my music that, like, that I didn't have total control over. You know what I'm saying? Now, it's a little bit different now because we're on the label and they distribute it, and then that goes through the whole process of being, digitally distributed to Spotify, and that's its own process. But we have that worked out. But yeah, to like straight up sign away your masters to somebody, or to, just to sign any contract really that puts you in a bad position, is just a no-go in general. Especially today, like, you don't need a label.
Well, and it scares the shit out of me because I'm such a control freak, where like if I didn't have control, it would freak me out. I wouldn't want to do it.
Right. It's your baby.
It is now. I really got nothing else besides podcasting and music, so that's what I do.
Right.
Now, right. After the Alchemist EP, what was obviously the initial reaction was fucking stellar. You get the the handshake deal with Unspeakable, and then you guys take a year or two and come out with Biological Enslavement. So walk me through, and it's going to sound redundant, but the writing process and how and the recording process.
Well, yeah, man, that the entire like timeline of when we were writing and recording Biological was pretty crazy for me personally in my life. With jobs and that sort of thing, but the whole writing process kind of just pretty much started immediately after I'd gotten the message from Eric from Unspeakable Acts. As soon as he hit me up and told me he wanted to put on an album, I was just like, with my band members, like, let's go, come on. So yeah, it was a very like just let's get the shit done sort of process. So we were kind of like on that. We were just trying to figure out what songs we wanted to put on it, because we were debating if we should just re-record the entire Alchemist EP for the album, which didn't end up happening. But we put the song on, the Alchemist is on Biological Enslavement, so that made it. But yeah, we just went full on with the lineup I had at the time. I had a super talented guitar player in my band at the time. His name was Michael Rower. but he and I would just trade, we would just trade ideas back and forth and on Guitar Pro sort of thing. So a lot of the ideas and a lot of the songs were developed that way, where I would have a song and then I would send it to Rower, and then Rower would just kind of, he was really good at sticking things in between riffs or creating transitions and just making like a whole song flow together. He was really fucking good at that, actually. Like if you go and listen to his lead work on there, it's damn near flawless. Some of the stuff, like I'll say one specific song, Forgotten Faces, which is a song he wrote. Actually, he wrote the whole thing, and that was like a 7-minute song when he sent it to me, and I chopped it down before. But yeah, his solo on that song is probably one of the best recorded solos that's on any of my albums. I'll say right now, like, that dude shreds. But yeah, so that's kind of how the process worked out. We would, have song ideas, we'd pass back and forth, and maybe like I'd lay down a drum idea underneath it and then show that to Brandon, and then Brandon would kind of try to copy that, or I wouldn't want him to copy it. I would just more so tell him to, like, listen to what I do, but make it how you would play it. Don't just copy what I do. But if it's that good, then just copy, you just kind of let him have creative control with how the drums were made, instead of like programming the drums and making them play exactly what I wrote. Sometimes he did, just because it was, it might be that good of an idea, but never just totally like buckled down to that idea. So yeah, that's how we basically came together. Just a lot of ideas over Guitar Pro and just taking them into the room. And I'll never forget, after we had written Forgotten Faces on Guitar Pro, Rower had just basically written out this insane, like, Forgotten Faces is, if you go listen to that, that's different than any other song we've ever made. It's just total tech death, like, shred the whole time. And he's written just a shit ton of blast beats on it. And I'll never forget, he made a really like offhand comment to Brandon about something about just like, oh, you wouldn't be able to play this or something like that. And, Brandon felt some way about that when Rower had said that to him. And so he was just like, I would always be like, listen to my drum ideas, but don't follow them exactly. And then with that song, he felt so challenged by Rower. He was just like, fuck it, I'm going to learn that whole song, and I'm going to learn exactly how he wrote it. And so when it came time to record, that was what that really started to fuck with him. When we got to that song specifically, he started to deal with like a lot of, he was just trying to pace certain parts together and just get them all perfect and stuff. Cause when you record an album, you want it to be picture fucking perfect, exactly how you want it. And so,
and then it never comes out that way either. Not to cut you off.
It never does. Hell no. No, dude, but you're right. You're 100% right. That's like, that's what we told him. And now, years later, when we can look back on it, it's not, he doesn't like have any bad feelings towards the project or towards the song. It's just like, at the time he had felt so challenged by what Rower had said, I think, that it really drove him to want to just fucking like, to just like smash this song. And, he got too caught up in that, but, we still made it. We got the shit recorded. Scott mixed and mastered it, like he said, it's just, I don't know if it was a learning process more so than it was just, another experience of recording an album and just learning through the process of recording what we should do and what we shouldn't do next time, sort of thing. And so, yeah, one of those things was like trying to like write songs and just like in Guitar Pro and try to make the drums super crazy. Like I didn't do that again, but, yeah, man, we did that. Got it all put out on Unspeakable Acts. It was our first label release ever with real PR behind it. And, the response was beyond anything I'd really experienced before. It wasn't like on a high level of like recognition where, we were getting thousands of views, but it was still, we got a review in Decibel Magazine and a couple other magazines. And, every day I was getting reviews and, I was getting interview requests, and it was just, it was a great time, We did a little bit of, we didn't really even actually tour on it. We just, once again, just did local shows. We went down to LA a little bit. it was just at the time the lineup we had with Rower and then Nathan on bass, you know, it just wasn't a touring band. I hate to say it like this, but, you know, just some of the guys weren't ready to, you know, commit to being, you know, financially and also like as a musician, what it takes to be on tour and go out there and travel and, you know, play for a crowd every night, be able to deliver. We just weren't at that point. And, you know, it was partially my fault for putting up with it, because, you know, I could have just gotten rid of the people that didn't, you know, weren't on board with touring and just got people in my band that were down to tour, and we could have made it happen. But yeah, man, I was just a little too caught up in trying to, you know, be in a band with my friends and trying to have, you know, some to share amongst us all. That was, you know, because whenever you start a band, you know this better than me probably, but whenever you have, you know, people in your band, you want to have, you know, people, you know, sometimes you got to end up like having people on that are kind of not randoms, but just people you don't hang around all the time or that you don't know that well. And it's, you know, it's a process to get through to that comfort level with somebody, you know, being like a really good friend. And so I felt like I had a fast track to that with the lineup on Biological Enslavement. And it ended up, you know, biting me in the ass a little bit.
It's like being in a band with like your girlfriend 24/7. You don't want
right.
that, right? You need some time away.
Sure.
So that's why I always, and you're right, I kind of do know it a lot actually. So that's why I would pick, yeah, like my friends, they are my friends per se, but like I don't hang out with them 24/7 sort of thing. You know, I need breaks from people. And it seems like
Sure.
you picked like your close friends to be in a band with, and unfortunately it's called the music business. It's not music and friends. So that did probably bite you in the ass a little bit. Now, but
Definitely.
I'm stoked at the fact that at least you know you were getting like reviewed in Decibel and stuff, and I'm wondering, when did the cartilage kind of thing happen for you? Cause,
you want to get into that?
Well, I'm getting into your whole career. So around like 2016, 2017 era, the whole cartilage thing happened. So what was that specific project? Because I don't remember this one.
No, yeah. Basically, cartilage. You know, they're you know, just gore metal, death metal sort of band in the vein of Exhumed and Impaled and Impetigo and things like that. But yeah, you know, it was a band. My friends Mark Rhea, Michael Flory, Adam, and who was on bass back then? I think it was our buddy Skizzy, but I think he had quit, and it was actually Nick Wilbrand from Continuum on bass back then. But yeah, no, I'd known Mark and Rhea and everybody in that band I've known for years, actually. Before Cartilage was a band, the drummer Adam and I, we were in a death cover band together called Voice of the Soul, and that's how initially we had met. And you know, I'd known Mark and Rhea, like I said, for years, pretty much. Like I've known them almost a decade now, so we've always been really good friends, and they've known me as a guitar player. And you know, Mark has kind of always seen me in my situation with Hemotoxin, and you know, just kind of one day he hit me up on Facebook and was just like, hey, you know, my friend, the other guitar player in the band, Michael Flory, was going through some health issues at the time, and they needed some help. And you know, I was more than willing. You know, at the time we had just kind of, you know, Biological Enslavement had come out, and you know, we weren't touring, and things were starting to die down because, you know, quite frankly, we didn't do what we needed to do as a band to promote it properly and, like, you know, keep that buzz kind of going for ourselves. So things were starting to die down, and Mark hit me up and was like, hey man, do you want to play guitar for Cartilage? And, you know, I was already familiar with them pretty much at the time, and I was like, hell yeah, like, let's do this shit. So, yeah, man, I ended up, oh man, it's such a blur now thinking back on that time. But I think it just was a thing where, you know, I was like, yeah, let's do it. And he sent me the songs, and, you know, they had a studio out in San Francisco back then, and I showed up there and they just taught me it. And then eventually it just morphed into me being in the band. And, you know, My time in cartilage was fucking amazing. Like I can't like say enough about what a great time it was. You know, it was a real learning experience for me just as a musician to see what it's like, to see that it's possible to go on tour, that it's possible for, you know, 4 or 5 people to come together collectively, or however many people you have in your band really, but you know, for a group of people to come together collectively and, you know, put all their, you know, put their sensibilities together to put a project out there. And, you know, I got my first tour experience with Cartilage, and I got to, you know, just meet a lot of great people, and, you know, just, yeah, man, I can't say enough good things about my time in that band. It was a huge learning experience that when I came out of it, when I quit Cartilage, it definitely set me up to approach Hemotoxin in a way different way than I ever had before.
Now, was there a reason for the split, or was it just like you wanted to focus just more on the Hemotoxin project kind of thing?
Yeah, that's pretty much all it was, really. At the time, you know, it was another life change for me. It basically made, you know, paying for a studio not feasible for me, or at least like a monthly studio like I was with Cartilage. It wasn't feasible anymore. And so there was that. And then, you know, the original guitar player who's now back in the band, Michael Flory, he was, you know, he started to, his condition started to ease up a little bit, and he, you know, started showing more interest in helping write the next Cartilage record, because when I joined, they'd already had one recorded and put out called Dialect of the Dead, which is a great record. And him and Rhea had actually written pretty much all the music for that. And so, yeah, around like late 2018, it just kind of became apparent that he was starting to get involved a little more, which at the time, like before I had even thought of quitting, it was kind of like a thing where I knew that was going to happen. And like, I almost like accepted it, because he was such he is such an integral part of that sound. Like I truly believe, like right now, every member of Cartilage is so important to that band. Like you almost can't have them without those people. So, it was kind of like a natural thing where, like, you know, he came back and I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to step back and I'm going to, you know, focus on my band, because, you know, the circumstances were just kind of leaning towards that. So there was no like bitterness or any kind of like bad blood or anything like that. It just became a matter of circumstance. I couldn't like really afford to keep up the studio anymore. Flory was starting to come back, and they were starting to, you know, Hemotoxin and Cartilage were starting to clash with each other, and so there were like certain nights where I couldn't play a show with Cartilage because I was going to go rehearse with Hemotoxin, and so there was a show where Flory ended up filling in for me, and that was kind of like the like, all right, like, you know, it's him now, like you're in it. And so yeah, we're still amazing friends. I actually helped them move out of their apartment into a house not too long ago, so we're still really great friends. I talk to them all the time. You know, the love Cartilage, those are, you know, brethren and sister for sure. Like, love them.
Absolutely. Well, let's go from Biological Enslavement to Restructure the Molded Mind, which came out this year, but I want to know why the 4-year gap. Was there, like, did a life crisis happen, or was it just like, you know, you're just so pumped to wanting to make the third record just that much better, so the writing process took a little bit longer, or kind of what was the reason for the large gap?
Yeah. Well, it was it was a little bit of everything. It was me being in Cartilage at the time. You know, like I said, Cartilage for me, it taught me a lot. It taught me how, you know, a group of people can come together and make something happen with music. And so, you know, especially the singer of that band, Mark, he is, you know, fucking gung-ho with everything. Like he gets shit set up all the time, and Adam too, everybody in that band. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is everybody in that band like goes above and beyond their call of duty to, you know, to help out kind of push this band forward. So, you know, they were just really active in 2017. You know, we had done a little Northwest tour with Succumb. We played Bay Area Death Fest. We just did a lot of stuff that year. in like the summer of 2018, so, or 2017. Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting all my years confused, but no, basically it became a thing where like, yeah, like cartilage kind of took over my life, and so that's why for like a whole year, Hemotoxin really didn't do anything, because we were in that situation where it was still the guys in my band that weren't really, you know, geared towards touring or anything, you know. They were just kind of more about the local shows, and it's like, that's fun. I love playing local shows, but man, I would much rather go on tour and do something, you know, that's, you know, do something that's not just comfortable anymore. And so, you know, I had almost willingly kind of just let Hemotoxin sit, and just, you know, because I'm the guy that kind of makes shit happen in that band and kind of like pushes to, you know, go play shows or get booked or whatever. And so, you know, once I stopped doing that, you know, pretty much put a halt on the band as a whole, because no one else in the band was proactive.
Now, did that kind of teach you a little something too, where like you needed to kind of designate some? Are you still there?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Just making sure I didn't lose you. But did it designate? did it designate kind of like, you know, you wanted like this guy to handle more of the merch aspect, or this guy to handle more of the business, or did it designate anything towards the other guys, or or do you continue to do most of the work?
No, yeah, I mean, I do continue to do most of the work, even now. It just kind of became a thing where I just had to learn to accept that Hemotoxin, and I think you can relate to this too with Madras, but it just became so attached to me and almost only me that people, like, you know, it's in my, I've attached it to everything I do. So people know me because of that. And I think with the other guys in the band, their lives aren't as invested into the name. And so I think they didn't feel as much of a responsibility to, you know, do things like order merch or book a show, or, you know, books, you know, just do something to try and like push the band forward. I think, you know, they were on board, you know, they were on board with me as far as like, you know, if you need help financially, like, we'll contribute, but other than that, like, we're just going to play the music and that's it. And even then, like, we still had troubles with finances a lot too, which held us back. So it was a lesson in me to learn that if I'm going to do Hemotoxin, if this is going to be a thing, that I have to learn to make it work for me, and learn to, you know, essentially bring in the people that will help make this, make this a real band, make this a, you know, a touring band a reality. And so that's kind of what the whole process of me, the whole learning process of being in Cartilage, seeing how that worked, and then going back to my band and being like, okay, now how do I make this work? You know, because obviously, like, I'm not going to just run across the person that's going to like help me shoot this thing to the moon. So it's like, you know, what do I have to do as basically the leader of this band to find the people that will at least fit into the mold perfectly enough that it can help me in some way to help, you know, just get shit going. And that's essentially what I did. Michael Rower quit the band basically because he got married at the time. And, you know, that was his life choice, and I didn't feel any sort of way towards him about it. We're still good friends. So, you know, that wasn't a big deal. And then big thing came up with Nathan, you know. It was a pretty shitty deal, I won't lie. Like, Brandon and I had spent basically the better part of 2017 and 2018 writing Restructure. You know, we this is the, you know, first album where we really didn't have anything going in. Like, Biological, we had Alchemist and like maybe 2 or 3 other songs, but the Restructure was the first time, you know, we had a completely blank slate. You know, we didn't have a song that we started with. We just like, or we did, but we didn't, like, you know, there wasn't a song that was previously written that kind of got it going. Like, you know, we started clean basically. And it was the same process, just without Rower. I would just like write songs on my own and bring them into the, you know, practice space, and we would just hammer out all of our ideas. And I think there's actually, the title track Restructure, The Molded Mind, was written by Rower, and then I kind of like edited it all together and like took stuff out and like changed stuff up. But that was like that's his last contribution to the band, if you want to look at it that way. but yeah, basically Brandon and I spent the better part of a year and a half writing and recording this thing, and Nathan wasn't there, and he was going through his own personal issues at the time, and I was trying my best to respect it and not, try to be like, yo man, you need to come and practice, like, sort of thing, even though we did, like, we definitely, like, were up his ass about it at times. I just never tried too hard to, get him to come out. And so eventually it just reached a point where Brandon and I felt very shafted by our friend, because it's like, we're trying to do this thing and trying to make this happen, and you're not helping whatsoever. And like, we get it, in our lives, when you're in a band, everything happens around that. And so it's like, it's always super stressful to figure out, like, if you have a really hard life situation going on or something, how to get past that and go, do your music stuff. Like, I get it. Like, that's incredibly hard, when, I'll tell you, when we were writing, Restructure, my Uncle Johnny, who was really instrumental in getting me, teaching me how to play music and how to record, and, just, what a microphone is, and just letting me, like, touch equipment and just, like, have access to it. He literally passed away, like, the day I went to go practice. Like, I was about to head out, and I got the call from my dad, basically telling me, like, hey, Uncle Johnny is, like, on, this is it, like, you need to go say bye to him. And, fortunately for me, where he wasn't too far from where we practiced at, but, I had to push practice back an hour, and I had to go see my uncle die on his deathbed, basically, and, like, tell him that I love him and I thank him for everything and all that. And then right after, I had to go to practice and, play music, and it was fucking hard, man. But, so I get it. Like, I've been there, I've done that. Like, I get it. Like, shit gets rough and you gotta go play music. And so Nathan was going through his shit, and I tried to level with him on it, but he wasn't trying to hear me at the time. And unfortunately, what caused him to have to leave the band, or I guess, I don't know, leave, kick out, however we interpret it.
His departure from the band, right?
Yeah,
we'll be amicable about it. Now,
yeah.
And I'm sorry to hear, my sincere condolences to you on your uncle. But what I do like about this story is I'm relating to it, because my uncle, who passed away in 2004, 2005, showed me all my music, kind of thing. So that's really cool. Yeah. So I'm kind of relating a little bit, and I'm glad you got to see him more than, some of us did with our uncles.
Right, man, exactly.
That's how you have to kind of look at it, unfortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to spend a quarter of your life, hanging out with your uncle, right? That's awesome.
Exactly. He got to show me so much shit about music that I probably wouldn't have learned if, I had an uncle that was, like, into cars or something, So I feel extremely fortunate, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about Restructure the Molded Mind just as an album. And I kind of want to go into it real quick before we get to the question, but I really love this album. And I'll tell you why. It seems like it's the most, I don't know how to play, like, a complete package. Like, this is like what Hemotoxin is. Do you know what I mean? You've hit your stride, kind of thing.
I'm glad you said that.
It's like the most cohesive, I think, is the word I'm looking for. Is it cohesive?
For sure.
Complete? Whatever, it'd be like the album that you would give somebody to, like, what do they sound like? Okay, well, here's the album that I think represents them the best, sort of thing. Hell
yeah, man, that's the goal. So I'm glad you feel that way.
And I'll tell you why, though, because the production and the songwriting, it was just a huge step up for me personally. Because I'm like a progressive thrash kind of guy. That's what I play. That's what I enjoy. And I always felt like album 3 for all of us bands is that specific album, right? Like, I think The Essence of Time for us is like what the Restructure of the Molded Mind is for you guys. Like, it's
absolutely.
The album.
It's the same. Yeah.
It's the album
the same
that
sort of
thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like that. Go ahead.
No, and I'll get to the question here, but I just wanted to at least put it out there. Like, this is the album I think everybody should go check out, right? But it's only been out a few months, I think this is the first album where you didn't have Scott working with you. So kind of walk me through the whole process of it.
Yeah. So yeah, with this one, it was almost every, the title is almost self-explanatory of the whole album process. It was a complete restructuring of, how we did this. Biological enslavement for me, it taught me a lot of things that I didn't want to do again. And one of those things was constantly punching in takes and, always like, trying to nitpick like sounds and stuff, just record it, basically like when we went in to record that, my whole idea with just the process of just laying stuff down was play it all in one take, do it as a whole. If there's little flubs, we'll go in and we'll punch them, but we're not going to punch sections. Like we're going to like, these are just going to be, songs are going to be the songs. We're not going to, try to punch it and mold it around the grid. We're just going to, I'm going to bring you the scratch track with the guitars, and we're going to, all the drum parts are going to get, fucking played as one whole thing, and we're not going to like punch it in like we did last time. And so that's how I approached it. But with the songwriting, I think for me, it was just not having any kind of like limitation, not having that Michael Rower to like put his riff in here that may deter an idea, which isn't a bad thing, that's all just creativity stuff. But I think for me, it was just finally being let off of it, not having to really like satisfy like anybody's taste in the band sort of thing. Like, I remember when Hunter was in the band, there'd be maybe some little conflicts of interest with like certain songs, and he would like want to insert a riff that over something that maybe I made. So Restructure was the first time where like, it was just, that it was so weird because that album is literally like almost how Brandon and I started playing music together in the first place. It was just him and I, a lot of that stuff was developed between Brandon and myself. Those songs on that album, like, it was just him and I just developing the ideas in the practice space. So I think one of the things that contributed to Restructure being such a cohesive album is the fact that we didn't really have anybody telling us what to do as far as other band members went. We just kind of we got in the room together, and we're both super open-minded type of musicians. Like Brandon, you can go and look at any of our like go to the Alchemist video. He's wearing a fucking Nirvana shirt. Like this guy does not give a fuck about any sort of like conventional like metal stigma, even though he's grown up in it probably closer than like most people that I know, because his mom was all about it and his stepdad was all about it, and had I have his stepdad's tape collection from when he passed away, and that guy was fully engrossed in like all the 80s, like thrash and death metal. Like this guy knew it all. But Brandon, being the kid that always knew about that, just kind of like, I don't know, in a way he knew about it, but he didn't give a fuck. Like he was just trying to play like shit that he thought sounded cool. And I think having that with kind of my sensibilities of respecting like the old school metal type of stuff, but also having an ear for more modern metal is kind of what contributed to that. His drumming on this album, I think, is just so rock fucking solid. Like I don't want to make comparisons, but I think it's almost like on a Neil Peart level of just like precision, and that's kind of what I try to go for, especially now. As a musician, like I'm not trying to impress somebody anymore. Like, I know my skills at a point to where I can play damn near anything. And so I think at this point, rather than trying to like play a sweep that's going to blow someone's mind or, try to do something trivial like that, I'm just trying to write the most hard hitting, heartfelt fucking music you can possibly hear. And, there's no sort of like, there's no me trying to be like rock star guy or me trying to like jock to position for anything. This is just what happens when you got two kids that are passionate about making heavy music when they come together and how their worlds collide, sort of thing. That's what you're hearing on that record. You're hearing the core of what Hemotoxin is, and like, you know, it's the musician relationship between me and Brandon. And then you know, we had our friends come. We had Shane came into the picture. He was on bass. Shane is the Bay Area's bass player, essentially. He's in so many bands. He's been on and so far he hasn't been on that many recordings, but you know, in the future they'll come out and he'll have been on a lot of recordings. But he's done a lot. You know, he's younger than me and he's already done a lot more than I have. So he kind of hit me up, and I was just like, it was still at a point where it's just Brandon and I. So I was like, yes, please join the band. But yeah, he hopped on, man, and he learned these songs, and I want to say like probably less than 2 months, and had it recorded. And then we got our buddy Steve Danska on lead guitar, and yeah, man, just got my buddy Zachary Taylor to do some guest vocals, and that's just how it came together, essentially.
I love it, man. And what has been the response so far? Because we're only, like I said, we're only like 2 to 3 months after this album came out, and with like the whole circumstances, right, surrounding this thing, has there been a huge buzz for it? And so, would you recommend other bands release music during a time of crisis, so to speak?
Oh God, man, so much to that. Yeah, you know, well, even before any of the, you know, with the stuff that's gone down in 2020, even before any of that ever happened, this album's been on like a damn near 2-year delay, just because of the circumstances surrounding, you know, the situations that happened with our old band members and stuff. So it had been pretty anticipated by a lot of people or not a lot of people, but, you know, just people that were fans of ours. They've been anticipating it for a long time. So there's a little bit of a buzz about it before it had even really come out. Cause I had spoken up too many times, and I'd be like, oh, it's going to come out this year or this summer, or, you know, I got ahead of myself way too many times, and I realized I kind of disappointed a few people in the process of doing that. So when it came out, you know, it definitely had a huge response, huge in our world, basically, because, you know, there's so many people waiting for it. But it, you know, people responded to it really well. The early reviews, you know, I really didn't even get a bad one, to be honest. Like, all the reviews were great for it. Yeah, man, March 16, when it came out, was the SIP, Shelter in Place, was when that all started, the day our album dropped. So it was, you know, it was pretty fucked up. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, you know, we had a free CD release show set up that ended up being canceled because of everything that's going on. And, you know, we've gotten response on the internet. I still get some reviews, you know, still, but, yeah, man, to be honest, as far as I can see, I haven't seen anybody really promote music right now and have the greatest outcome from it. So would I suggest people release music right now, especially with what's going on? Probably not. Probably not the best time to be doing that. At this point, with how long I've waited to put this album out, I'm just like, you know, I don't even care what's going on. Just like, I'm glad this thing is like just out there in the world, because I've put so much time into it. But it's like, at the same time, man, like, yeah, we should have put it out last year, huh? But yeah, no, it you know, for what it is, we've gotten a pretty good response from people. I think overall, people recognize the effort we put into this record, and a lot of people appreciate it. And so, you know, I'm happy about that. But yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know where I'd be right now if, you know, things hadn't gone down the way they did in 2020 with the album release. So I'm pretty disappointed by it, but, you know, making the best of it.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, this is becoming a staple in my specific collection, because I love this kind of metal. I don't just play it. I love this kind of, you know, style. And I feel like there's not a lot of bands that kind of do it not, I wouldn't say do it right, but do it with, like, that can make great songs out of it. How about that? How about
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like, it's a style,
We,
yes, but the good songs is what I'm after.
in my opinion, and this doesn't go for every band, but in my opinion, I think a lot of guys attach themselves to the death thrash sound, and I think like I said, it's just my opinion. I think a lot of people tend to ignore the more foundational bands, like the big four bands or whatever. They tend to undermine the really big sort of bands and try to copy these smaller, lesser known bands, which is cool. Like, it's cool to embrace the bands that, you felt like didn't get enough recognition. I think at the same time, some of these bands get a little too caught up in trying to be like their idols. People will say I did that with Chuck and Death, and
Ditto.
there might be some validity. Yeah, right. There might be some validity to that, and people can, they can say that if they want, but it was never my intention, to try and copy that band, exactly. And I go back now and I'll listen to some stuff. I'm like, okay, maybe that was a death riff that I may have ripped off. But, like, I think that's one thing a lot of bands tend to do. But, that tends to be something every band does when they first start, is kind of copy who they love. Of course, how can you not? But at the same time, I think some bands kind of make too much of an aesthetic out of trying to copy, old school bands that, didn't get enough attention. I know Autopsy has been like copied to death by a lot of like death metal bands that are coming out now and stuff. A lot of that like gritty, like raw, like lo-fi, or not lo-fi, but like more like
the doomy death. Yeah, I'm not really into it as much. I do like those bands that you named, but I don't like my metal like that. I like my metal kind of, a little bit more layers to it, so to speak. So I think I definitely would recommend Restructure the Mold in Mind. And lastly, how can people get the record?
So, yeah, I was directing people to our Bandcamp, basically. It's hemotoxin70.bandcamp.com/merch. We have shirts. We have the Restructure the Mold in Mind full-color album art shirt. And we have the CD package, too, so you can get that for like $25. But, we have our merch and stuff set up. Unspeakable Acts also still has copies of the album. So, if people want to pick it up and they want to get some merch from us, I'd say go to our Bandcamp and check that out. But if you want to pick up our album and maybe check out like the newest the newest stuff out on Unspeakable Acts Records, like the newest Cemetery Filth record, then definitely go to unspeakableactsrecords.com and go check out their merch store. But yeah, you can buy it. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, YouTube, all the streaming services it's available on. So yeah, people can support however they want, really, at this point, now that it's available on all the platforms. Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Well, dude, thank you very much, seriously, for coming on the show. I really, appreciated talking with you and learning a little bit about some Bay Area history right here too, especially for the new guys. I always feel the new guys in the Bay Area never get credit. It's always the old school, because obviously the thrash scene was huge there, but I'm always after the new thing. I'm always, because I'm in it. I'm in with the now, just like you guys.
Yeah. You've been in it longer than me, man. Shit.
I appreciate that, and hopefully, we keep going, right? That's the whole point to it. But,
absolutely. Man.
Another episode of Puppets Corner. I'm out of here, guys. Cheers.